Hi, I'm Claire Atherton, and this is episode 15 of Beating BDD, the BDD Foundation's podcast for people with body dysmorphic disorder and their families. This is the second part of a conversation between two mums whose daughters are both in recovery from BDD. In this episode, Scarlett and Frances discuss how schools can help or hinder, how to support someone through treatment, and the importance of setting small goals.
I think they have so much stress at school with work, with social media, with friendship issues, particularly girls maybe on that. I don't know. There's so much, isn't there, for them to focus on generally. So I think with BDD as this sort of enormous great issue over the whole thing, just maybe cut down on some of the other things like GCSEs or...
at some stages
anything.
you just don't think about GCSEs as being important.
They're just not then. I think, again, it's about extending that timescale.
I think our society puts those pressures on us. I don't know. I have a very different view about school education nowadays than I used to.
Yes. Well, I think some schools, this is an interesting area, isn't it, about what schools can do to help. And I think a lot of schools are getting more aware of mental illness, more aware of mindfulness, more aware of the necessity for calm, more open discussions. There was actually a really amazing man at Katie's school who did run a whole sort of wellbeing wellness program, which was incredible. And he really did understand what was going on. And I take my hat off to him now, just to have a few people in school. I think I sort of identified just one or two who I knew were going to be on Katie's side, genuinely on her side and genuinely understanding what was going on. But schools generally, I think they don't really necessarily understand it. And the whole sort of emphasis on academic achievement without bearing in mind everything else in the mix. Back to you.
Well, Alana was at a grammar school and she was quite bright and top of her year and highly functioning. She was also on the rowing team and getting national medals, and she was their favourite. When she started struggling, they dropped her because... There was no pastoral care at all. They thought that the statistics of her missing so much school would look bad on the school, so they wanted to get rid of her. They couldn't. They had to let her sit the exams at least, because I put my foot down. And she then tried to do her A-levels there, but because they were so unhelpful, she didn't manage, so she had another year at home. We found a very good college that she went to, and she didn't have to go in. If she didn't go in, the teachers would be very proactive and helped her out and everything. So they actually enabled her to do her A-levels.
That's great.
It was just chalk and cheese, the way she was treated. So
I think it's that flexibility, isn't it? It's so that they understand that somebody is just expecting them to do their best and to go in when they can. And I suppose, again, it goes back to this understanding of what BDD is, what the genuine struggle is. It's not attention seeking. It's not being difficult. In fact, it's entirely the opposite. It's feeling utterly miserable, isn't it? And genuinely struggling. And I think if schools just understood that that is a massive deal to get into school and face, I know Katie talked about feeling as if everybody was looking at her all the time. So it wasn't just dealing with friends, it was dealing with the whole fact that you were there in a school environment with so many people around every day looking at you in their minds, BDD sufferers' minds, looking at them all the time, their faces and their flaws.
Also, when they did manage to go in for one day or so, of course, the attention would be on them because they hadn't been for so long. So everyone wanted to know what was wrong and that. So that makes it worse as well.
Yeah, they don't want attention drawn to themselves at all, do they?
No, they just want to be normal.
Yeah. So treating BDD, we all know, is unbelievably difficult sometimes and a really complex sort of mix of perhaps therapy. And in Katie's case, she was offered DBT, so dialectical behavioural therapy, and I learnt a bit about that, which is quite useful. I think the really sad thing is quite often you have to go so far down before you can access the very stretched services. That was certainly our experience. Until you're in A&E, you're not going to be picked up by the specialist cares, the people who really understand BDD as opposed to anything else. So Katie was diagnosed at about 12, and then I think didn't really access therapy, didn't want therapy, was pushing it away all the time, saying there's nothing wrong with her at all. It was her horrible family, her horrible house, horrible everything. I think she was really struggling, but when she was diagnosed, that helped us anyway to have that in the back of our minds. And then I think when she was in crisis, we were then picked up by CAMHS, who I must say did an amazing job for us, really amazing job. And the crisis team came to our house because Katie obviously wasn't going to go out and meet them. And I remember Katie once saying to me, nothing's happened. It's absolutely hopeless. We've just been having a chat and that's fine. And of course, the therapist said to me quietly afterwards, it's fine. I'm doing my thing. It's all, that's understandable that she would say that, but they were working through it. So we did have one in particular, amazing therapists who then stayed. But of course, after a year, you're apparently out of crisis because you are going to school a bit more. And of course, BDD is still there. It's not going to disappear in a year, I wouldn't have thought. Certainly didn't with us. And so then you are left with it. And Katie felt she could manage it on her own. So I suppose there's a sort of mixture of, do you continue with medication? Do you see your GP for longer appointments? Will you be able to get those? I think it's a really difficult minefield in terms of getting treatment. But I suppose for us, the key moment was Katie leaving school, actually, because then all the pressure of having to face your school peers and all of that horrible toxic mixture of struggling to get through it all every day disappeared. So, and then, she went travelling actually, and then retook an A-level, which is fine because she didn't do brilliantly in one of them. So just took that year to do that before applying and getting to university. But yes, a bit of a sort of wiggly path, I think. And I think the services are just genuinely in crisis. They did absolutely the best they possibly could have done for us anyway. How did you find it?
I found it slightly different. I took her to the GP and so he referred us to CAMHS, and we went to CAMHS, and they did not diagnose Alana with anything. They thought it was family problems, so we had family therapy. But afterwards I found out that we only got family therapy because she was on the waiting list, and that was the first available therapy that came up. Whether it suited her disorder or not, we were just given it to tick us off the list that she was getting treatment. So I think Alana got, my husband as well, but I always put so much hope into any therapy I could get, and I just thought it's worth trying everything. But obviously Alana knew better that really wasn't helping her, and my husband just didn't really understand. So after that, I took her to a private clinic it was Cardinal Clinic in Windsor, and she wasn't diagnosed there either by a psychiatrist. She had some CBT for appearance issues, but it wasn't specifically for BDD. And I'd say it might have helped a bit, but it wasn't really the thing. And then Alana Googled, why am I so ugly? And then we saw on the BDD website, got some information from there. And there was a trial at the Maudsley at the time, and I applied for that, and Alana was seen and was diagnosed finally at the age of 17 with having severe BDD. And she was offered the 12 sessions. She only managed to go into about 4. And at the time she had a abusive boyfriend that didn't help. So she sort of couldn't make it into the other sessions. They were weekly. I don't think it was concentrated enough for her. But the Maudsley were very, very good, and they pushed for Dr. Veal to see her. And she actually went in as an inpatient to the Priory and had 4 months in the Priory. So that is 24/7 treatment, all sorts of things, CBT, mindfulness, exposure therapy, which Alana found very helpful. And so she was then discharged from there, and from having 24/7 therapy, there wasn't much in place. She could go back weekly, which was fine for about 4 weeks, and then it was down to nothing. But we felt that Alana was starting to spiral back down again. So I then got in touch with a very good CBT therapist who then treated her. It was Dr. Rob Wilson.
Who's wonderful.
He is. And Alana connected with him immediately. We'd sort of met him at different conferences before that. And I think he brought her through for the final sort of struggle. And initially we went weekly, then every 2 weeks, and then just as and when she felt like it. And she hasn't seen him for a long while now because she's out of the other side. The other thing I found very difficult, Professor Veal had prescribed her certain medication that works best for BDD, and the GP didn't want her to take it because it cost about 40 pence more than the normal medication, and he was saying it was the same, but it actually isn't the same. I know Alana could probably explain it medically much better than I can, but that's not important. And I had to fight for it. I remember one day staying in the doctor's surgery, refusing to leave until they actually prescribed it to her. And every time I had to fight for her to get another repeat prescription, and so it was very, very difficult to access. I did offer to buy it over the counter, but the GP said you can't pay for it privately because you're disadvantaging other people that might not be able to afford the 80 pence a day, and you then won't be able to see a GP anymore at all. So you'll be struck off. So I have really had to fight the system all the way. She now gets her medication. She's coming down considerably, so she's only on half the dose that she was. She's taken herself down, and she feels that she might come off it one day, but it's not important. She's functioning well with it at the moment, and of course, as they're going through catching up with their education or whatever, you don't want to come off anything like that in exam period, or you just have to find the right time. It's not important. It's, she's taken it so long, it helps her. So, yeah.
So that's quite interesting. So you had quite a bumpy path to access the services,
yes.
Which we did as well. We had Katie not wanting to take medication, so not really admitting she had BDD at all. I mean, she still now probably talks about appearance issues. That's okay. You can talk about appearance issues. So in a way, I thought, fine, it doesn't matter. It's just a label, really. But in terms of getting it treated, Katie didn't want to take antidepressants at all or medication at all. And I think that is very hard. I mean, with smaller children, I think at one stage we had liquid form, so you can get a syringe and then insist you administer it. But that's so horrible for them and for the parents. But I think there's no way around that if they don't want to admit that they're struggling as much as you can see they are, and they don't want to accept whatever help is there. So I think that is a really tough one for parents, and you just have to sort of hang on in there, really, and go back to the basics of small steps, get through each day.
It is really hard, because I remember when she was having treatment at the Maudsley, it was a 2-hour drive. So trying to get her there for her treatment, it was awful, because she wasn't really convinced that she had BDD, and it was early days, and it's quite normal for people, not even though they've been diagnosed and they want it to be BDD, but not to actually believe that they've got it. And the same with going to the Priory as an inpatient. Up until I got her there and dropped her off with a suitcase, I didn't think she would actually go through with it. It was just, I always had this horrible feeling that I knew it was something that would help her, but she might not accept it.
And that's it. They have to sort of accept it, don't they? They have to accept the help. And it's.
But I remember going to one of the groups at the Priory for a BDD support group, and taking Alana along, and she had her hood from her hoodie right over her face, and she sat in a corner and didn't look up at all. And I was just there desperately trying to grab at things to try and help her and that. And it just so happened that Professor Veal was at that group, and I was so desperate. I asked him, I said, what can I do to get her to have treatment and that? And he just turned round and smiled and says, her time will come. She will accept it one day. And I was so frustrated with what he said to me. I just, but he was right.
But you can understand that. Her time will come. You can't force anybody to have treatment or therapy. It's not going to work if you do.
No, but for a parent to hear that is quite frustrating because we're so desperate to make them better.
Yes. I think you just want a fix. You would do anything to make the situation better, wouldn't you, day to day, and not have that sort of sick feeling every time the alarm goes off in the morning that here's another day and you don't know what it's going to bring. And yes, you just but there's no such thing as a quick fix. I think with BDD it's probably sort of work in progress.
It is
a lot of the time, now, I think,
yeah.
And even for parents, and this whole thing about accepting it and accepting looking back. Just sort of trying to accept it all. That's just how it was. And as you say, trying to find the sort of the brighter sides of it. You were talking about your relationship with Alana now, which is lovely to hear. And I think the brighter sides, one thing I did find was it became a sort of bit of a weird game with a great friend of mine whose daughter's been quite ill as well. And we would ping each other WhatsApp saying, what are your white dots today? So in that yin yang symbol, when you've got it sort of flowing between black and white, and in the white there's a tiny bit of black. So there's a sort of edge sometimes to sadness, but much more importantly, in the dark black section, there's the white dot. So we used to say to each other, so what was your white dot today? And I thought that was just so helpful. We did that. We still do it sometimes. Things are really still a bit tough. And you'd say, so what's going on? It might be something really small, like the sun was shining, or I don't know, I quite like the haircut I had today, or something really silly. But then it might be something more serious. Obviously, in the BDD days, it's Katie got out of her bed, or we had a really lovely conversation. It was so nice. And that's a massive white dot. So I think looking out for the white dots or whatever similar is really helpful. Hanging on in there and spotting the things that are good so that it's not all overwhelmingly black when it is.
I think also you have to try and get a bit of humour into there. I think Alana now is at such a good stage that we laugh about things that she did. She just, the funny side of it, we can joke about it now. Whereas,
but you couldn't have done that, could you?
No, I mean, not at all.
2 years ago, 3 years ago, there just didn't seem to be any humour. I think you sort of forget to even use those muscles in your cheeks that help you smile, let alone laugh. I think it can become.
I also think as you're recovering, you forget how far you've come.
Yeah.
It is a long journey, but each day that improves, you forget how bad it actually was.
Yes. So I think that's it's really important to notice that, isn't it?
Yes.
To actually think each day. Well, then also white dots, when the white dots become more frequent, because sometimes it seemed so dark. There was a big gap between white dots. I think I even said that to Katie once. Do you know what? I can cope with this as long as there's just little tiny glimmers of hope every so often and the gaps aren't too big. And then, as you say, they sort of become smaller gaps, and that's astonishing. And I think, yes, just being kind to yourself and just realising actually you've done really well as a parent, and looking back and thinking where you have come. And I think it does seem a very, very long path. I remember one friend of mine saying, oh, well, you won't be there for weeks, you'll be there for months or years. And at that time, getting through one day was pretty tough. And I couldn't even imagine years, plural. But I think if you do just narrow the steps down, as we said earlier, and just make them very small, and then you think, oh, I've got through the day, that was okay. And then you get through another day, and then you think, okay, we've done a week. And that's how I approached it anyway.
So, Frances, how do you see the future for Katie, for yourself?
I can't have imagined ever feeling particularly positive about it. And so we've moved on so far. And Katie, I really enjoy my relationship with Katie now. So I'm really enjoying that. I love the fact she phones me from university and we have a good old gossip sometimes about what's going on. So I'm really, really enjoying that. Everything I sort of hear that's positive, and on the whole, it really is positive actually about how she's getting on at university is really exciting. And it's like a little sort of miracle. Sometimes I pinch myself to think this is actually happening. And I'm really enjoying her sister being sort of growing up and being a bit involved in that. Going away with my husband, that would be nice. Going away together would be really good. And so I think as the children are both sort of growing up and they're both becoming much more confident in themselves in their different ways. And BDD is probably still there a bit, but it's something that's acknowledged by Katie, and I think she manages it really well. And she's going out, she's having a good time, she's making friends, and that is just fantastic. And so I think I'm feeling much more positive, and I'm enjoying my job more, which is quite difficult to keep it going through the dark times. And I'm really fortunate in what I do at work, and so really looking forward to doing a bit more of that too. How about you?
Well, I feel very positive. Alana's come such a long way. She's she's got plans to go on to doing clinical psychology if she can get a place, but if she doesn't get a place immediately, she'll go and work at a CAMS or something and be a psychologist. And I found, though, once Alana started recovering, that there was a bit of an empty hole for me. And yes, I'm trying to do things for myself now. All the years I've missed of time for myself, I'm sort of trying to go to the gym and things like that. And also giving her brothers a bit more time that I sort of neglected, but they're older now, they don't really need me either. But trying to get on with my husband a bit better, because it was sometimes very trying as a family, because men and women approach things differently. So we weren't always on the same team, really, which was not good. So yeah, I'm looking forward to going away on holiday with my husband together and things like that. Yeah.
Great. And spending more time doing sort of enjoyable things and even simple things.
Yes.
Going down to the sea,
things.
going for walks.
Walking my dog every day.
Walking the dog, stroking my cat. That's been great to find out more about each other over this podcast. I just really hope it helps people. I remember, as I say, seeing you two at that conference and just sitting there thinking, I can't imagine that. And just now thinking, yeah, I'm sort of part of the BDD family, really, in a way, of people who can get through it and have got through it. So it would be lovely to help other people think that they really, really can. They're not alone. Look at the BDD website. And I hope some things we've said together have been helpful.
Yes, I hope so too. I just want to reach out to as many people as possible, really, especially because we were in the dark for so long and didn't know what it was.
Hang on in there.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed both parts of the interview with Scarlett and Frances. If you missed the first half of their chat, you'll find it on the BDD Foundation website as well as major podcast apps. Just search for episode 14 of Beating BDD. And if you'd like to leave us feedback and find out when new episodes are out, just follow the BDD Foundation on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube and Facebook. I'll be back with another interview soon. Until then, take care and thanks for listening.